episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
Still don't feel like I'm working hard enough. I've got that chip on my shoulder. I never feel like I'm doing enough. But here we are yet again, deja vu all over again. I last saw you about 7 minutes ago. Welcome to Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And of course, tonight, sort of special STS coverage of the Michelle Troconis trial. And that is because today we're closing arguments and the jury went into deliberations late this afternoon. Obviously no verdict expected at this hour, but we will be on it tomorrow all day. And the COE is making me put this up there. You may or may not know, we have a second channel now that covers just trials. It's called Best Trials in True Crime, even though this little logo says Best Guest, but that's because this is Best Guest. But the Best Trials channel will be on Verdict Watch tomorrow, and we will bring it to you live there when we get it. And seeing Belgium in the house, a truly global audience. So this trial, just to give you some perspective, today is February 27th. This began on January 11th, so it's been going on for weeks. 6 regular jurors, a little unusual. Usually it's a 12-panel jury, and a bunch of the alternates. They started with 5. 3 of them got eliminated, so there's 6 regular jurors left, and 2 alternates remain. Jurors did hear 7 weeks of evidence, and a first-time best guest here who's friends with a friend of the COE's and mine. Shout out to Jen Bernstein. Jim Bergen handles complex criminal and civil litigation for the law firm Shipman and Goodwin, handles white-collar crime and government investigations, personal injury, and wrongful death cases, tapping into his 40 years of experience as a trial attorney, and he will give us some great insight into all of this. Ryan McQuiggan may or may not be joining us. He is also a criminal trial lawyer, and I'll leave the COE to bring him in. Then we've got bottom left corner, Lisa Daddio, love the name, retired police lieutenant out of the New Haven Police Department in Connecticut, not too far from Hartford. She spent approximately 16 years in the detective division, and since retiring back in 2012, she works in higher education. She's with the University of New Haven. Same story with Bobby McDonald, bottom right corner. He was both a state of Connecticut and United States probation officer, and he spent over 20 years with the Secret Service. That is the United States Secret Service. His duties included presidential, vice presidential, and dignitary protection divisions in Washington, D.C., and then he went to work for a little sports league called the NBA, and now he is teaching. Jim, to you, first off, how common or uncommon? I know at the beginning of this trial, day one, we were all flabbergasted. There was no opening statements. And then we found out in Connecticut, no opening statements. Everyone thought it was really odd, except for the people in Connecticut. So that's par for the course. But what about a 6-panel jury? Is that also fairly common?
It's all there ever is, except for murders. And conspiracy to commit murder apparently doesn't earn it. So we only have 6. We usually pack in a few alternates, depending on the length. And here, as you know, we did go through a few, but we still had 1 or 2 left. But that's common. And the idea of opening statements, it's awful that you can't do it. I have begged, occasionally been able to get it, and I have been able to get it in federal trials, because if you don't do it, it's just a disservice to the jury. People want to know what's going to happen. I had an 8-month trial, 6-month trial, Wells Fargo case a zillion years ago, and the judge gave us 10 minutes. That's all we needed. 10 minutes is enough to frame a case.
Yeah, in TV news, a story is 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'm not saying I could do opening statements, but you don't necessarily need an hour and a half. But I felt the same way. I felt like the jury was going to be perplexed. I am not the smartest or brightest bulb in the box, and to just be thrown into a story literally midstream, it was tough. And I'm wondering how tough it was for the jurors to connect all the dots. Look at this. Patriotiac. Am I saying that right? Lisa Daddio is a living legend. Lisa, who is this person?
I wish I knew.
I want to make sure you're not paying family members. Lisa, on a serious note, this is a big trial because Fotis Dulos is now infamous, and Jennifer Farber Dulos, the victim, very beloved, beautiful woman, her life cut short. How big a deal, and I asked Bobby this last time, in the state of Connecticut, how big has this trial been?
It's huge. Since this case actually happened, it's everybody talks about it. Connecticut is a small state. And so when we have crimes like this, and we've had a few, unfortunately, over the years, the Cheshire home invasion, where 3 women were brutally murdered and raped, definitely was another one of those really high profile cases. And this, because it's a no body case, right? So unfortunately, Jennifer's body has not been found yet. And so I think that helped, and it's intriguing. You have the soon-to-be ex-husband. They're both very wealthy. You have this girlfriend, fiance, possibly, that is all involved in this. And like this kind of, it's not a love triangle, but it's definitely something that people are intrigued by throughout the country, not just here in Connecticut. I mean, I have students that were talking about this case, and they live on the West Coast. So
yeah, we have people here literally from Australia, the UK, all around the world who are interested in it. This is an interesting comment. Joel and COE, this podcast is outstanding. Thank you. It's not why I brought it up. Suggestion: interview people who had family who were Nazis and the guilt and anguish, deep sorrow. Prior to being true crime, this originated. The reason it's called Surviving the Survivor is my mother is a Holocaust survivor. And I was saying on the last episode, she was just speaking to 8th graders today. And someone pitched to us when we were doing our original show, which was once a week, and we didn't take it very seriously, that there was this couple. They weren't married, but they were going around on a book tour throughout the UK. And she was the child of a survivor, and he was the child of a Nazi. And let's put it this way. It didn't go very well for the child of the survivor. My mother the interview didn't go very well for them. And you can find out why. It's somewhere in the archives. Maybe we will repost it. Carmela felt that instead of preaching, they were going to synagogues to talk, that they needed to be out talking to different sorts of people. And when Carm lets loose, she can give you an earful. And it was one of those moments. I had to claw her off these 2 people. So that's a whole other story. But Bobby McDonald, this is one of these cases, and I'm going to, get back to Jim about this, where it really, you don't know that you're going to get a conviction across all counts here. Do you think there's extra tension in the air as a result of this right now?
Well, I agree with what Lisa said. There's a lot to chew on here, and a lot of different areas that have been brought into the courtroom in this case, but with, a little bit of cloudiness along the way, which is, what obviously the defense wants here. So it'll be interesting to see how the jurors, in reviewing the evidence that I understand was loaded into their jury room or in preparation with boxes and boxes of stuff, will sift through. I think we were at 29 or 30 days of trial, something like that. There's a lot of stuff to chew on here. So, has the state proven beyond a reasonable doubt their case? That's the bottom line of our system here. That's what the prosecutors are required to do. And the defense is required to muddy the waters with respect to that. So, like I said, there's been a lot to chew on here, and it'll be interesting to see when it all kind of filters down to see what the bottom line is here. And again, how long it's going to take. Is it going to be something quick? Are they going to latch onto something and run with it, or is it going to take a little bit of time? It's going to be interesting to see.
Shout out to Dwayne Harris, always generous in the great city of Detroit, Michigan, as I like to see. And Shaquille O'Neal, first trial I've seen with no opening, but not for Jim. He's seen plenty without openings. Speaking of openings, today we're closing arguments. We'll get to those in a minute. But after closing arguments, by the way, Judge Kevin Randolph, he's got the voice of God. A lot of people think he sounds like Morgan Freeman. But I'm just wondering, he has to deliver jury instructions, Jim. How careful does a judge have to be in delivering those instructions? What's the process? Just explain that to all of us.
Well, the process which he already followed, for the first time in the history of Connecticut, he actually allowed television to watch the arguments of the lawyers to help him construct the final charge. Ultimately, the judge is totally in charge, writes anything the judge wants to do. Their main concern, of course, it's justice, but frankly, they don't like to get reversed. So they work really hard to get out of each of the lawyers every single thought they've got so they can make sure they've covered everything so they don't get reversed. Here, this judge has really been remarkable. I mean, he's so calm. He lets his opinions out very, very miserly. He doesn't really want to step on anything, but he is trying to keep decorum. And so here he just went through 50 minutes, but even better than having this recorded on TV so that everybody can see what actually happens. The jurors each got their own copy of the instructions while he was reading it, which is great. I mean, I've had a couple of those, but for decades, that just was not done. You know, judges love to have complete control, even though we say it's all about the jury. Well, now we're doing it more all about the jury.
Yeah, and Jim, someone wants to know if trials are generally televised in the state of Connecticut.
No, there are exceptions, but each of those exceptions are sort of well known. You know, we had a big televised trial back in Western Connecticut some long time ago where they were investigating somebody who was friendly with the state police, which was weird. And I actually was hired as a special prosecutor to investigate the state police in that case. And it was so odd because you could see everything that happened during the trial, even though, you know, that happened before I was retained by the governor. So it's just, I can't even think of how many there have been. It's just very rare. And I thought it was interesting and gutsy on the part of this judge, because the judge is very low key.
Yeah, very.
Oh, by the way, that judge actually has a master's in communications from Syracuse, which he got in the beginning of, and he actually did some business lobbying. He's the most laid back guy, but he has stuffed his life and his brain with a lot of experience and still comes across authentically humble. He's a really humble guy.
Yeah. Jennifer Jansen in the chat says, good point. Judge is commanding. Yes, he is. Now we find out why. Lisa Daddio is a living legend because of her incredible work on the Annie Lay case at Yale. Such a sad case. If you didn't see it, we do a show called Surviving My Biggest Case. And Lisa Daddio was on it talking about Annie Lay and how they discovered this gruesome murder and and how they took the steps to solve the case. So kudos to Lisa for that. Lisa, to you, the lead investigator in this case, John Kimball, formerly of the Connecticut State Police, he was a detective. He tweeted out a couple of times today, and he was in there. And by the way, from what I understand, Jennifer Farber Dulos' mother was in there along with the children today. So that is a very poignant moment. But this is the lead detective on the case. He tweeted out, please keep Jennifer and her loved ones in your hearts today. Justice for Jennifer. Hashtag Michelle Troconis. What is that? What kind of statement is that when you've got the lead investigator who is tweeting and showing up in court? He really wants justice in this case, doesn't he?
He does. And, you know, social media is a funny thing. It's obviously very much part of our lives now, where 10 years ago, when you brought up the Annie Lay case, it wasn't. So we wouldn't be tweeting. That case pled out, so we didn't have a trial, which probably could have been televised as well, because that case also got a lot of attention. So, we live in a different world. I'm old school. I wouldn't be tweeting until after, if at all, the conviction came in. But I can tell you that in order for an arrest to be made, especially something like this case, everybody involved in it believe that, she's guilty. Or else you're not going to make an arrest in a case like this, and the evidence, and it's a tough case. You don't have a body, which, really makes for really complicated cases. And there's so many twists and turns for those of you that have watched this trial from the beginning. It's tough. And Michelle Troconis is the only one currently that can be found at least at fault for some of it, because Photos had killed himself.
Yep. Here's the sad photo of beautiful Jennifer Farber Dulos and 5 kids who are now orphaned, been orphaned for a little while. And as I understand it, we're there with Jennifer's mother. So I think it goes without saying that everyone who's part of STS Nation, we are sending our love to the Farber family tonight. And this is the difficult part. But Bobby, you've had to testify in a court of law. What do you think it is like tonight for the family, for both families? You've got obviously Jennifer Farber's family, and then you've got the Troconis family. What do you think that tension is like as they are awaiting the jury's decision?
Well, I'm sure they're all on pins and needles. Both sides of the aisle are basically victims here. It's to piggyback on what Lisa just said. We've really focused on victims and their rights in the courtroom and their rights in the process. Maybe the last 30, 35 years. Before that, they were a part of the process, but an often forgotten part of the process. They weren't informed of court dates, and they weren't informed of restitution that would have to be provided. And they were really a forgotten entity in the whole process. And I really think we've done a pretty good job with our victims advocates in the courts, with our victims advocates in the federal U.S. Attorney's Office and things like that, to make sure that our victims are informed and are watched over during these process. Look, that's why a lot of us are out trying to solve cases every day, is so that we don't forget the victims. That's why we have people working cold cases that are curious and passionate about going out and not forgetting what happened, and the forgotten people who haven't gotten closure or haven't gotten a resolution on their case. So it's a very, very important part of the process now, and it's kind of refreshing to see the investigator. I'm not a big social media guy, but it's nice to see somebody out there to say, hey, let's remember what we're doing here and why we're out here doing it.
Bobby, I knew you were smart, not a big social media guy. Tell that to my wife. Can't get her to talk to me at night. Doesn't talk to me.
I'm ancient. That's my problem.
Yeah. The COE doesn't. She ignores me. She doesn't talk to me. I told her the other night. I'm like, I'm over here. Anyway, Jerry Michael says, Jim, I'm going to come to you for 1,000 things. You're the only lawyer, so you're in trouble. So I'm going to go back to Lisa on this one. Do you think the judge thoroughly explained everything? You do see him explaining quite a bit because of the cameras for teaching purposes. Did he have to be on his best behavior? Not that he's not normally Kevin Randolph, the honorable Kevin Randolph, but what do you think the cameras did since the state of Connecticut is not used to having them inside the courtroom?
Well, first of all, that's his personality. I knew him, 30 years ago. We lived in the same town, and he was the most humble person. You would never have imagined him getting himself into this incredibly high-profile situation, because how he comports himself is just how he is in the ordinary course. He just thinks, and he is selfless. It's a very interesting guy. I would never have guessed it. So the answer to the question is yes, teach, but he does that everywhere. He just likes being thoughtful. He likes explaining things, and I thought he did a remarkable job. Yeah, by the way, I wanted to add one thing to the comments that Bobby made, which is that in Connecticut, because I spent a lot of time representing victims, it's constitutional. There's not many states that have it, that it's baked into the Constitution, that victims have a right to be heard at every key aspect of the prosecution of a case. And sometimes it's very important. I get to go in frequently when they have the negotiation sessions where victims advocates typically aren't. But when I'm a lawyer representing the person, they usually just let me in because they know it's going to help get things done. But honestly, it makes a huge difference. A lot of things get happen and just they never know.
This is an interesting point from Annie K, who always has great questions. Michelle Troconis, Lisa Daddio, showed her face for the first time today. She has been hiding it quite a bit and kind of playing with her hair here and there. Is that to make eye contact with the jury or trying to read them? Do you think that on a day like today, she was trying to show them the human side, and maybe it's too late. Maybe she should have been doing it more, but what do you make of that?
Yeah, you said it, Joel. I think it's too late. I watched several pieces of this, and I found her very cold and kind of detached. And if I don't know, if it was ever me, which it never would be, I would want to make a connection to the jury, and she did not at all. I mean, she was kind of standoffish, and I think in the end, like to me, she showed no empathy. She showed no anything. She looked very cold, which has been the way she's been throughout the entire thing. So that's nothing new. I give Jennifer's family and friends and children a lot of credit. That can't be easy, what they've been going through on the days they have been attending the trial. And right now it's every part of their life and everybody's watching it. So it's horrible for them.
Yeah. And to that point, Bobby, the kids, that's what got me, because they're young children. I mean, there's no way, it's a dumb question. What do you think the kids are going through? But I'll ask it anyway. I mean, they're so young. Their lives, I don't want to say they're forever destroyed, but it's certainly going to be far from a normal life for them. How do you think, I mean, they're the biggest victims, obviously, aside from Jennifer Farber, but arguably they're even bigger victims because they've got to go on without parents now. How do you feel for them?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something Lisa said earlier. The state of Connecticut is a small place. And you know, people are going to know about this. Kids that they're going to school are going to know about this. Their teachers are going to know about this. Their soccer coach is going to know about this. They're always going to be those kids over there. Those are the ones. And that's something that, again, maybe over time is going to slow down a little bit. But for the near future, I think that's going to be, you know, the talk of the town, and they're going to be the, you know, they're going to be in everybody's sights, and hopefully the community, the family, friends around them will reach out, embrace them, and continue to help them grieve, continue to help them, you know, figure all this out. I'm not sure you can figure it out. I'm not sure an adult can figure it out, quite frankly, but hopefully the community will rally around them and family and help them get through this, and certainly never forget, but try to move on and try to put it a little bit behind them.
Delta Foxtrot, this could be, this always blows me away, because Donna Adelson was arrested on body cam footage. We've been following her case very closely. And there's literally a moment, and I know I always get yelled at because they're like, well, she killed her son-in-law, which that is what she's going to trial for. Obviously, his innocence was taken completely away. But if you separate it for a moment, she had one step in a moment of life where she was free, and the next she was handcuffed, and she will likely never be free again. Same deal. Michelle Troconis could get out and could get convicted very likely on lesser charges, and we'll ask Jim about that in a second. But Lisa Daddio, why is it that people don't, in your world, criminals, people who do bad things, why don't they think about the consequences? Why?
Oh gosh, that's like the $1 million question, Joel. I don't know. I mean, every day almost I'm scratching my head as I read something that comes across that is horrific that happened in our country, and never mind outside of our country. That's a whole other world. But I don't know. To me, it seems like it's getting worse. But then I remember we have social media, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, and everything's immediate, right? So we're knowing about it a lot more. I I don't know how people do what they do. And some of the comments I've been reading on. So if you see me looking down, because it's always interesting to see what people have to say. And I learn a lot too from what they're saying. But, somebody posted like, I can never hurt another human being. I don't know how people can do that, hurt people and also hurt animals. Right. And so it's like these two things that we're constantly torn between, and yet have to, I don't know how you go there. I can't wrap my head around it. And so, but yet it happens every single day. Somebody's murdered every single day.
Ignore the comments that say Joel is a putz. Don't read those. Jim, the charges here. Where'd my charges go? Conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to tamper with physical evidence, 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence, and 1 count of second-degree hindering prosecution. Obviously, this conspiracy to commit murder is the most serious. If convicted on all these counts, how much time does she face? That's question number 1.
Well, theoretically, it's 60 years, but that's not realistic. In fact, when you have a substantive count and a conspiracy count, the way it actually works, almost always they meld into one. And so you got the 20 years for the conspiracy to commit murder. That's just sort of like the floor. I would suspect if they go across the board and find her guilty of everything, which I'm not right now putting my money on that, 20 years is probably the realistic maximum. But theoretically, it's 60. But if you just link together the conspiracy and the substantive counts, it's probably the 20 plus the 5 for the tampering charges, and then plus 10 for the hindering. But again, the hindering, if you're somebody who's a conspiracy to commit murder, everything you do is hindering. So, you don't usually just get more time for that. So, the real answer is probably 20 years.
Which is probably not enough. But this is arguably an uphill battle for the state here to get convicted on all these charges. If you're a betting man, and I don't know if you are, what's your prediction for the verdict here? Do you believe that she would be convicted on all counts, or just some of these counts, or none of them?
No, I don't think she's going to get convicted of the conspiracy to commit murder. It was a very effective summation, but most people, everybody so far I've seen writing, and even frankly, the guests here, we're really showing incredible, appropriate empathy for Jennifer, her surviving children, and her mother, as we should. But a trial of someone like Michelle Troconis is really not the best place to get that done, because she had 2 full years of abundant experience with this guy. He is, in fact, maniacally, sociopathically dangerous. And we heard evidence in this case how he could turn on a dime. Remember the time he pushed the door open and he was having this real, kind of angry physical encounter. He gets into the other side. He sees the babysitter, one of the kids, turns on a dime, and suddenly he's nice. This is a very manipulative guy. And if you look at Michelle, her whole 2 years was this guy presenting himself to her like I love children. He's picking her because she's a family person. So the idea that she's going to now wrap her head around that everything I've been experiencing isn't true, she never looked at it the way every single person watching this right now looked at it. We looked at it after the police started from the exact opposite presumption. And so what we've really got here is that tension. So short answer, I don't think the murder. I think she's most vulnerable on the hindering.
Really? Do you think it's possible? So you think the conspiracy to commit murder is out? You don't think that they're going to convict on that?
I don't think so. But honestly, when I watched Manning's summation, she really put things together in such a strong, clever way.
Yes.
And I don't think defense really did what I just did in 1 minute. I just explained the perspective of Michelle. I would have spent the entire time just talking about her perspective. The 2 full years. He did John brought up, I thought very well, the notion that most of us, when we have trusted friends, we just presume they're telling the truth. You don't imagine you don't imagine the worst ever. You can't function that way. So unfortunately, I think it's also true that because she doesn't know how to act here, she is reinforcing everybody's pre-existing presumption, which is not innocence. It's the opposite. It's because everybody's looking at this from the point of view of the police who started this. It's her.
Bobby, I think I may have asked you this last time, but there's sort of this, for Michelle Troconis, do you think it would be different if Fotis Dulos did not unalive himself as he was awaiting trial back in 2020? Do you think it'd be a different dynamic today? In other words, would the public writ large have gotten that out of their system, and now by default, since he's no longer here, they really want to see her go down?
Yeah, I do. I think that the focus would have been primarily on him. She would obviously have been a part of this, but I think most of the information that would have been presented, most of the information that would be coming out in the newspaper or on TV, I think would have his name on it. And yes, she is probably part and parcel of this whole thing, but the fact that she's left here holding the bag, I think we're shining the light on her pretty brightly, rather than if he was still with us.
So I tend to agree with that. And Lisa, do you agree with Jim that it's going to be tough to convict on all counts here, and that maybe she's not going to get convicted? This has got to be a tough deliberation here. But what do you make of Jim's take?
I agree. As much as I would love to find her, or for the jury to find her guilty on all accounts, I also know what they're tasked with, right? And so it's not easy. I don't feel compassion for her at all. But that's also because I am very victim-centered. So I feel for Michelle, her family, and the nanny and her friends, and who have had to endure all this horrific everything. If she's innocent, say where the body is. I mean, my God, give the family closure, for Pete's sakes. This whole, I didn't know what were in the bags, but we're stopping, all these locations in Hartford to just, to get rid of them. And you're not asking him what are in the bags, or what are you doing? And, you're involved in building and construction and doing all this other stuff. It's just a weird thing for me to wrap my head around, for her to kind of give the impression maybe that she's also a quasi victim. Other than the fact that he was a sociopath. So, I don't know. It's tough, but I do agree. I think they're not going to come back with a conviction, a guilty on all charges.
Jim, go ahead.
Until this case, he had never once been violent. He had sold everybody everything. He had sold Jennifer's dad. He had sold he's a great salesman. And so the idea that you can't wrap your head around why is she supposed to know things not one other person knew? Nobody knew. And then, of course, the police start reconstructing it with the retrospectacles. And when you do that, of course, it looks absurd. But you have to go back. If the jury is following the law, they have to go back. It's only about her brain. Nothing else in this case matters. It's her brain. The police did a really amazing, thorough job, crazy good job. And the mother deserves, and the surviving kids, and the mother of the victim, they deserve so much love and support. But that is a complete distraction. This was not about either of those things. This is about Michelle Troconis's brain. And if you only look and start from the proposition of he never revealed anything like that to anybody, and she's the last person of the 4 billion people on the planet who's going to reveal to her, hey, this woman that I've selected, and I presented myself as this family guy who loves children and all that, I actually just, killed the mother of my 5 children. The idea that he would let out a molecule of actual belief of that, to me, is very hard to wrap my head around. Why would he do that? It's crazy. Mm-hmm. But I do understand how everybody feels, because I start from the proposition of protect victims first. But I also, as a lawyer, I have to believe in the law, and the presumption of innocence in a case like this really does matter. Nobody who's watching this ever looked at this show from the whole 2 years she had, and right up until the day before, where everybody's celebrating. I love the prosecution's argument. Celebrating because they're going to get rid of her. Yeah, but does that really fit his relationship with her during all that time?
By the way, if you can't tell that Jim is a trial lawyer, now you can. I believe everything this guy is saying. I'm just buying full. By the way, though, when I can correct a defense attorney, I will. You said 4 billion people on the planet. I think it's closer to 7 billion, Jim.
Oh, but I was only counting the first half.
Oh, okay, there you go. Look how quick he is. Look how quick he is, man. These guys are amazing. They are seasoned. Dwayne Harris, again, donating 5 memberships. The guy is way too generous. And I didn't see what, but I saw in the chat, Dwayne, I hope you're okay. I just saw little rumblings, and maybe not everything is okay, but I hope you're all right and your family's okay. Jim, back to you on this one. What is the potential sentence if it is only the hindering charge that she's?
Oh, still a big one. 10 years.
10 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I don't think she's going to do that well. 5-10 years. That's a long time to serve. Bobby, I can't get over this. And I know I asked Lisa this, and I'm almost sure I asked you this last time, but with Photus Dulos, it sounds like it could almost be like pathological or pathology, something going on in that head of his. Less so, I think, with Michelle Troconis, but bigger picture, why do people commit these crimes when you know you're going to sit your ass in state prison, or you're going to have to unalive yourself because you don't want to do that? Why don't people think of the consequences?
Well, Lisa and I have a former colleague that we worked with for a while that's a retired FBI agent, and I'll clean up his statement a little bit. But his statement is that all criminals have a sense of stupidity about them. And that's not to demean them as people, but it's to look at why they get involved in things. Why do they do things? Why does it keep people like Lisa, me, and Jim in business? Because we're always going to have those folks. This is all over the media. It's all over TV. It's all over the newspaper. You would hope that somebody sees this and sees Jim explaining the years that she's facing. And you might think it might come into somebody's head to say, yeah, gee, maybe I shouldn't do that as I'm about to do something. But it doesn't happen. People just get involved in whatever they get involved with. It doesn't always mean they're bad people. It means they find themselves in bad situations. But there just is something out there that doesn't let people have that second thought or that third thought before they're going to get involved in some type of nefarious or violent activity.
By the way, that hat over your right shoulder on the top shelf, is that a bobby, like a British bobby hat?
That is a British bobby hat.
And is that a real one?
Yes, it is. It's from a presidential advance of George W. Bush to Sedgefield, England in 2003.
Wow, that's the cool stuff you get when I have to buy the paper mache one in the gift shop and give it to my kid, and then I tell him it's real.
Oh, that is authentic.
Wow, look at that. I'll have to bring my little son up there. He'll love it. He'll probably rip it apart. This is an interesting question from Jerry Michael, and I'm going to throw it to Lisa because I've got too many legal questions for Jim. But Lisa, do you think if this played out and Fotis was going to trial, if she may have flipped on him and could have turned state's witness, this could have all been so different?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that's always a possibility, especially because a lot of everything, right? He could have done the same thing to her. And I think, I would hope the empathetic, compassionate side of her, because she's also a mother, she would have done the right thing. And so, yeah, it's tough though, because again, I have a hard time with her, and usually I don't, but there's something about her that just rubs me the wrong way regarding this whole thing. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just her personality, who she is, who she's always been, that kind of cold, standoffish, not showing any empathy or anything, has always taxed me from the very beginning of this case.
Bobby, let me put you on the spot before I get back to Jim. How long do you think they're out deliberating for on this?
Wow,
that's a tough one. Because to me, this could be a 5-day deliberation. I don't think it'll be that short, but watch, it'll come back tomorrow morning. It seems like juries just don't deliberate as long as they used to. But what do you think?
Well, as the three of us know, and not to speak for my two friends here, but you can never pinpoint this thing. You never know what's coming. I don't think this is going to be as quick as we might think, or some people might think. I think it's going to. I think it's going to last a good 4 or 5 days before anything comes back.
Wow. Jim, do you agree?
What I most agree with is I have no clue.
It just doesn't feel like it does not feel like a open and shut case at all. But John Schoenhorn, he's the defense attorney. What is his reputation, Jim? Good attorney.
Very thoughtful, very experienced. I've known him his whole career. He was actually involved in that Wells Fargo case I was talking about, $7.2 million robbery back in the early 80s, and it was prosecuted in the late 80s. And he actually was also involved in that case. My case went to trial. My guy was the only one who went to trial and was acquitted of all charges. But in that case, the reason I was able to acquit him is because they overcharged. They had not a molecule of evidence that he was involved in a bank robbery. And then they hired my guy because he was some, anthropology guy, and he was into social stuff. And they gave away a bunch of money, and that was, good for the help of Puerto Ricans. We'll give away money. There was no evidence whatever that he was involved, but they charged him with the murder. And that really opens up the easy argument, ladies and gentlemen. There's no evidence. They know there's no evidence. And they're asking you to find, contrary to your oath, that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Keep that in mind for every other thing they did in this case. And frankly, I might have worked on that a little bit in this case. I thought the worst evidence in this case was the language that Pavel used. But then, and everybody here will remember that language. They used it in their summation. What Schoenhorn failed to cover was the context where she only said it in the context of where that Jennifer wasn't going to let the kids grieve the dog, say goodbye to the dog. And she was just so angry, and they were talking about having to bury the dog. And so it was really just an expression of anger at that lack of compassion and kindness for her own children. That was the context. But, Pavel, he ran with it, and everybody else has, because it just establishes, if you believe it, she meant it the way it sounded here, of course she's guilty. She wanted, to bury her. But it was really a context problem.
Well, that to me is one of the most damning, pieces of testimony from Pavel, that Michelle Troconis said, it rhymes with witch next to the dog, that Michelle Troconis said that about Jennifer Farber Dulos. That's the kind of thing, to me, Lisa Daddio, that a jury picks up on. Like, this woman's got a bad bone in her body. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And the listeners and those that are watching agree as well, because I keep seeing it. Absolutely, it does. And that's something that you can't let go. You can't unhear that, right? So it's something that's going to be there. That if she's going to say something like that, what else is she capable of? What other front or facade is she putting on? That is the true Michelle Troconis. I don't think we've seen it.
By the way, Jim, you are right. 8.1 billion people on the planet. You said you were only counting half the planet, so you are right. Here's some sound from John Schoenhorn, the defense attorney at today's closing arguments, courtesy of the COE.
He thought she didn't know, then that's reasonable doubt right there. This trial is a tragedy, no question about it. It is a tragedy for many people, including people that are sitting here in this audience, in this courtroom right now. But this case here is not about sympathy. It's not about antipathy and revenge. There is only speculation and no facts. We are all sitting here in hindsight, deciding what happened after the fact, what one should have known versus did know. What we can do when Michelle, for example,
Counsel, you've got 1 minute.
Thank you. When Michelle picked up Fotis from the car wash, she didn't go in there. She had nothing to do with what Photus Dulos planned to do with that vehicle on that occasion. Now, I don't get another opportunity. You may think that the state has a second bite of the apple. That's not fair, but it's important for you to understand the reason for this is they have the burden of proof on everything. We don't. So they do get to speak last, but I want you just to remember that they have a burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt for each element of each of the crimes the judge is going to read to you, and I ask that you reach the correct verdict, which is not guilty. Thank you. Thank you.
Let me give you my first thought there. By the way, Jim, STS aired this trial and watched every minute of us. Many of us may not like Michelle's character, how her attorney defended her case, but did you see him present enough reasonable doubt? That is the question from the COE right there. So she's taking over the show again. Jim?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. He almost emphasized the opposite by saying what he said. When you say, well, but is it beyond a reasonable doubt? It's almost like conceding, well, it really happened. And I think that there were other ways, which I've already suggested here, to deal with this is just to get the jury to think of what's in Michelle's head the whole time she knew Fotis, and to praise the police, not put himself on the other side of the police. He made the defense seem like it was fighting everything, whereas I really do believe Fotis is a dangerous person, and I don't think she had a clue. Her entire life has nothing that suggests, oh, I'd be interested in somebody like that. In fact, I think she was selected precisely because she was really a family person, and he knows how to manipulate. So it's sad. It is, in fact, I see somebody comment, not the jury's job to get in the mind of Troconis. Exactly wrong. That is precisely the only legal issue in this case. It's a criminal trial of her, and it is only a crime if her brain actually is seeing it and understanding it and decides to do it anyway. That's, in fact, I'm glad that person said that, because that's the whole thing. But you didn't see that trial. You saw a trial that was trying to, and appropriately did, draw on the sympathy for Jennifer's surviving family and draw on your applause for the cops doing an amazing job. But what they started with was the opposite of what she started with. So if your participant in the show thinks that it's not the job, obviously somebody didn't do their job. I think the judge tried to keep that on track throughout the trial, but we'll see.
Yeah. Schoenhorn gets a bad rap for objecting a lot. Is that his style, Jim? There's a lot of objections throughout the trial.
Well, it's interesting. The parts of the trial, because I didn't watch every minute of the trial, but every time I saw him objecting, the judge was sustaining most of them. In fact, even during the summation, one objection. And the judge actually reprimanded the prosecutor for it. So, the perception is if everybody is cheerleading the conviction, any objection is offensive. Come on, we got a train to catch here. We're trying to drive it into the station. But in fact, most of the objections I saw, the only flaw I would see is a lot of that stuff is, who cares? The cops are great. The family's great. That's not what this trial's about.
Yeah. By the way, when I watched this, for anyone who cares, which is pretty much nobody, including the COE, my very first thought for some reason, number one, is John is no Jim. That is for sure. He does not have, in my opinion, I don't know, there's like a likability factor. But Lisa, I was also thinking, would Michelle Troconis have benefited from a female defense attorney? There was something about him that, as a juror, and I know you're supposed to be, impartial, that maybe would rub me the wrong way. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
no, Lisa, go ahead.
Jim just wants to be like,
yeah, Lisa, it's you. That's you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, absolutely. I think she would have benefited from a female. And again, it goes back to the perception, the psychological side of it, people analyzing everything. And, if there's a female defense attorney that is standing alongside of her, I think it's a win-win.
Bobby, to you from Love My Sully Blue. not defending Michelle Troconis, but she never met Jennifer and only had Photus Dulos feeding her information. Plus, Michelle Troconis reportedly was very jealous. I mean, jealousy can be a motive. What do you make of this comment? She's kind of implying that since she didn't meet, she wouldn't have the motive to help with the murder. But if she's jealous, maybe that's not the case. Maybe she did have.
I think you may have referred to that earlier in our program here with the, the triangle aspect of this, although not officially a triangle, but, we all know people who are in other relationships now that are divorced, and the cross-pollination that goes on there with the kids and events and all those different things. So yeah, I'm sure that potentially could be part and parcel of what's going on here. Is it the whole shooting match? I don't know about that, but I think it's obviously something that from the optics of this, that it certainly is in the mix.
So I did my my homework here, and I kind of laid out the closing arguments on behalf of the defense. And Jim, I'll go to you on this. So John Schoenhorn basically begins, whatever Photos Dulos, and obviously I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but whatever Photos Dulos' role was, my client did not know that Photos Dulos planned to harm her. It goes on, did not know Photos was capable of doing something like this. The case is based on unfounded and unfair assumptions just because she was romantically linked to Photos, and then goes on, and I'll stop after this, that this isn't reality. It's more like cable scripted TV movies, that it's all conjecture. I mean, he's making, powerful arguments in a vacuum, but do they hold up in light of the evidence, do you think?
Well, some of what he said really does hit home, and a lot of what he said, I think, unfortunately for Michelle, created a distance between him and the jury. To call all of the evidence that the prosecutor just finished going over a complete conjecture, there's evidence, but the evidence doesn't really point to Michelle's head. I would have spent all my time dumping on Photos, nothing but Photos, because that's who messed her up. That's who messed this up. So there's plenty of evidence that you don't have to call speculative. They proved him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The problem is, if you really believe that, how did he pull it off? By being the most manipulative person any of us have ever imagined. Most of us can't even imagine a person like this. You bring it up yourself. In fact, I think everybody so far mentioned it. How can you even think like this? Well, the truth is, he's not right. He's really not right. But he knows how to survive very well in this world. And he picked somebody who he knew he could present, because he presents himself to everybody as this great salesman. So why couldn't he be able to sell her? He's handsome. He's rich. He loves kids. At least there was no evidence of him ever being tough on the kids, even other than the fact that he made them do more skiing than they wanted to do.
Jim, when you watch a trial like this, I know, like when I watch news, COE can attest to this. I'm always screaming at the TV, horrible sentence here, horrible writing there, terrible shot here. Do you kind of play along and say, well, I would have done this, I would have done that? This is a good argument. This is a bad argument.
I try to resist it because I actually have a lot of respect for John Schoenhorn. But it is true that Audrey, his partner in this case, to the point made earlier, and by the way, she was the last president of the Connecticut Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. She's very highly regarded, and she does come across well. So there may have been a point to having a female doing it, because I think you really have to have the jury feel that you feel what they feel, not argue against what they're feeling. You don't win an argument by just talking about point B. People are at point A. You got to bring them to point B. You can only get them there if you start at point A. As soon as you jump into point B and say, hey, point B, it's the best, you've lost. You got to start with point A and work them slowly so they get themselves to point B. You can't just say, hey, this is the darn law. You better find beyond a reasonable doubt. Otherwise, you got to go my way. It's almost an invitation to do it the other way. So the answer to your question is, I tried to resist very much, and it was hard.
And Jim, because you're the only attorney, I need you to answer this one too. Why didn't the contempt issue remain in the trial? since it could have affected the outcome if in the media. I thought they're going to bring up the contempt issues separately. But for those who are just tuning in, it had to do with bringing up some sort of sealed document in court that someone who knew Jennifer Farber was able to point out. Can you explain this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. The judge, who I've already said is so patient and all that, he's very feeling responsible. And when he sees something like that in his courtroom, he feels he's got to do something. I had said when he first did that, I said, geez, he doesn't want to have this anywhere near this trial. And he changed his mind a couple of days later. And clearly it's way better to get it not touching this trial. That contempt is really to vindicate the rules of law and the sense of order. It's not to mess up this trial. So it really is great that it's now been punted, different judge, different lawyer, and I thought the judge handled that very well.
This is an interesting question for Lisa. Since the jury is human, yes, they are. No animals that we know of on this jury. The fact that she was cheating with him will weigh heavy on the verdict. That she was cheating will weigh heavy, even though it shouldn't. What about that aspect? Again, you can't, as much as you tell a jury to follow the evidence, they are human beings and they are going to judge this woman, aren't they?
Absolutely, they are. And it's not just Jennifer, it's the children, and the fact that they were left without their mother. And they still have not yet been able to have full closure because we don't know where she is. And so all of that, and yes, they have to listen to it and they have to, we're human beings. You can't turn off that emotion, that empathy, that compassion for the victim's family. And no matter what, again, I just think that Michelle, she did not do herself any favors throughout this trial. Not that she should, but she's not an innocent victim, I don't think, in this either. I don't buy that either. So again, this is where Jim and I disagree a little bit, and that's great. That's why you have, competing things on it. But you can't take that human aspect out of a juror ever.
This is why this is my lovely wife, the notorious COE. She gave herself this name, and someone else did, but she's co-opted it now. She loves it, and I like it. But this is why Jim, my wife, could definitely duel with you as an attorney, even though she's not an attorney, but everyone in her family is, except Space Ghost. My feelings and heart and instincts would vote guilty. But as a juror, legally based solely on hard evidence presented, is there beyond reasonable doubt for conspiracy? I don't know. Classic COE. She lays it all out and then says, I have no idea. So she can't be wrong. She can't be right. Look, I'm happy I'm not a juror. There you go. She's being honest there. Bobby McDonald. So John Schoenhorn, he's kind of in a tricky place here, but he ultimately concedes that Photus Dulos, he was kind of tiptoeing around it, but then he goes, he is responsible, but Michelle had no idea, and major questions still remain. It's still unclear what happened. He had to do a job of, they're this couple, and she was cheating on him, on Jennifer with him, and he has to couple them together, meaning Michelle and Photus, but at the same time, he's got to kind of peel them apart. I don't know if you caught all the closings, but I'm wondering if you thought John Schoenhorn did a good enough job to say, look, she was with him. He did do this. She had no clue.
Well, again, not an attorney, and I certainly don't play one on TV, but, Jim knows very well that he had a job to do here today, and he had to work with what he had. And whether he had a lot or he had a little, he still got to get up, get his tap shoes on, and figure out, how he wants to address the jury at the moment that he had to address them. You got to order off the menu that's in front of you at the time. So you've got to bring everything that you have in front of you, all the tools in your toolbox, and go with your best shot within the time limit that the judge was allowing for this case. So, it's going to be interesting. This case, and watching the attorneys here, watching the testimony of the investigators, has allowed us real time to allow our students to follow this case and really see how this stuff goes on. And we have our lectures at school and we have our book work and all this other stuff. But here's an opportunity, which we don't normally get in Connecticut with the cameras, for our students to see what's going on, how to argue a case, how to testify in a case. You know, we try to make things as realistic as possible in school, but until you're seeing it in real life or spending some time in a courtroom, you know, I've been there as an agent, I've been there as a probation officer. I've seen both sides of the aisle, how you argue a case. As Jim said before about the demeanor of the judge, you know, you're arguing cases, you're not arguing with people. And we really need to be able to show that to our students, that you go in and argue your case and you all, at the end of this whole thing, shake hands and move on, because there'll be another case down the road. So for our purposes at school, this has been a great teaching tool, albeit that you've got, you know, victims in this case and people who are going through a tough time. So we try to balance both of those areas and be able to utilize this as a teaching tool for our students in our criminal justice program.
I've said it once, I'll say it again. Space Coast, you see his mug right there. He is the smartest member of the COE's family. He is now, he got the highest score in the LSAT, did not go to law school, but he is now deemed Chief Legal Counsel of STS. Chief Legal Counsel of STS. And Jim, we give him a day, he'll be able to argue with you. So will my wife, for that matter. Yeah, we went over this one, misbelieving, and we think that it could be different. But let's take a listen. This is now the state presenting their closing arguments. We'll run through that, get some final thoughts, and wrap this up as we await deliberations. But here's the state. Let's take a listen.
I pose this question to you. Do any of you doubt that Fotis Dulos is responsible for the death of his wife? Do any of you doubt that he was in New Canaan on May 24th, 2019, murdering his wife? How else would he have had her bloody bra, her bloody shirt, blood all over the bags, his DNA in a glove found inside the trash? How? And so when the defense suggests that to you, I suggest that's not reasonable. And so once you conclude that Mr. Dulos is responsible for the death of his wife, you then go to the next questions, which are, is this defendant legally responsible for her death? Is this defendant legally responsible for conspiring to tamper with evidence, for acting as an accessory to tamper with evidence? Was the defendant motivated to harm Jennifer Dulos? I want you to make no mistake about this. This defendant hated Jennifer Dulos.
Jim, your thoughts on that, and then I'll give my thoughts.
Well, he just took advantage of the point I was just making about Schoenhorn, because he distanced himself, and the prosecutor jumped on it. He distanced himself by suggesting to the jury, like he's somehow defending Fotis. Like, who wants to defend Fotis? Oh, you never know. You know, it's all speculation. Oh, come on. Let's just at least concede that. He killed her. He's a horrible guy. But by doing that, he opened himself up for this. Do any of you doubt that? He was doing what I suggest that I did to the prosecution in my Wells Fargo case. Look, if the lawyer is trying to get you to believe something you know isn't true, keep that in mind for everything else out of that mouth. So here, I thought he was really strong when he added, you'll see her animus. And frankly, I don't think anybody who ever saw her in her life saw her as having animus, and had some of her friends who represented her, I thought, pretty well. But if you only look at those things he pointed up, and out of context, it's a very strong case. Manipulator, 2 years of torture, better go to therapy. You know, I don't know why going to therapy is a problem, but it seems to me that she's trying to make things work, you know, but, you know, she just didn't know the Fotis that we all came to know, because we only heard of Fotis when we heard that his wife is suddenly missing. And then we start seeing all this other stuff, you know? So everybody here, anybody who ever heard of Fotis, started hearing about him after the police found all this incredibly resourceful evidence. And everybody except Michelle. And when she sat there, you actually watched. See, I thought more people were going to pay attention to her struggle in those 8 hours, because I thought you just looking at her, if you start from the proposition she doesn't know this guy to possibly do anything like this, and then of course she's realizing, oh my God, he could do stuff like this. That's why I say she would testify against him in a heartbeat, even deal or no deal. She's like, this is horrible. She doesn't want that woman dead, but just enough. If you go around pick and choose, I've told people I don't know anybody who can't get convicted of a crime. It doesn't divide up into good people and bad people. We all need checks and balances on ourselves because we want what we want, and we're not always seeing everybody's point of view. So when you just pick all those things, he did a nice job there.
Yeah. KCL brings up, this is actually a very interesting comment. KCL is all over a lot of trials. Another thing that makes me question Michelle's innocence, Lisa Daddio, is that in Fotis's suicide note, he said both he and Michelle are innocent. That is something an investigator might pick out. Makes me think she's more likely guilty based on that alone. And it's what Jim was just saying. If you're saying something isn't something, then it probably is. And here he's including both of them. Is that a problem? Will the jury pick up on this, do you think?
I think so. There's going to be at least one person on the jury that's going to bring that point up. Will all 6 of them remember after all these days of trial? I mean, think about it. Imagine being in that courtroom day in and day out and being presented with so much physical and testimonial evidence. And then you have the emotional side, and then you see the family, and then you see all of these things. It's impossible to retain all of that as a normal person. Never mind sitting in a juror's box. So there will be somebody that will probably bring that up, at least one. And so, whether or not that's enough for people to be like, well, what did he exactly mean by that? Who knows?
Bobby, let me run through some of the closing arguments from the state here. By the way, it's opening statements, closing arguments. That's a news guy in me. I get yelled at if I ever mess that up in the news days. So the state goes on to say that Michelle actively tampered with evidence, that she, in fact, assisted with the cleanup, that the 3.5 hours Fotis never leaves the house. He leaves it. He never leaves an empty house. He's there for 3.5 hours. So what's he doing? And then goes on to say the state does that's a reasonable amount of time to prepare garbage bags, and that Michelle Troconis' DNA was found on those bags, which were eventually dumped throughout the city of Hartford. Troconis initially tells police she took 2 or 3 trips that day. Then it's 5 trips. Bobby, I'll stop it right there. I had you on last time, and we were looking at inconsistencies in her statement. Again, it's an investigative tactic. That's what detectives do. That's what law enforcement does. Will the jury also see these inconsistencies in her statements as pointing to guilt?
Well, I think inconsistencies are a huge problem for her in this case. Nothing spoils the story like the arrival of an eyewitness, Mark Twain once said. And obviously she was involved in this, and the fact that, or she's involved in something here, and the fact that her story is changing, as Lisa just said, all 6 jurors may not pick up on that, but somebody in that jury pool is going to pick up on it, and they're going to run with that aspect. And someone else is, and this is just my opinion, someone else is going to pick up on the fact that they went to all those garbage cans on Albany Avenue in Hartford. Why did they do that? My garbage is being picked up in the morning, and I'm just going to put it outside of my garage here tonight. I'm not running to the dumpster down at the 7-Eleven to get rid of anything. So there's a lot of things here that are just odd, that maybe 1 or 2 of those don't point to guilt in this case. But when you start adding up things that are odd, is that going to allow those jurors to pick up on beyond a reasonable doubt? Don't know. And it depends on what those deliberations are that go on in that room, and who presents a leading force of the jury, whether it's the foreperson or somebody else who's got a large personality or a great memory, or is articulate in the way that they want to argue a point that they want to bring up in that room. So I think we've got a lot of variables here. I think we've got a lot of variables in the story that she projected over the course of time, and it'll be interesting to see what they pick up on most and what they end up chewing on.
Yeah, and detectives always talk about putting together the pieces of the puzzle, and it's like putting together the evidence. And one of the things, Lisa Daddio, and I promise we'll start to wrap in a moment. The state, Michelle Manning, went on to say, as Fotis Dulos was carrying out this alleged plan to murder Jennifer Dulos, Michelle Troconis is manipulating his phone, so it looks like he's taking a shower, so it looks like he's in his office, so it looks like he's answering his calls. All this is starting to add up in this state closing argument. Is it, now that we're going through it point by point here? I don't know. I'm starting to think maybe you do get a conviction when you hash out all the points. What do you think?
Well, and it goes back to she isn't stupid, right? And in fact, I think it's just the opposite. There's a part of me that wonders if she's just like he is, and that being the narcissistic, the sociopath, she's not any angel either. So, and it's not just because of the whole cheating thing. I mean, it's more than that. That has come out about her character and, just the type of person she is. And so, yeah, you have to look at everything. And Bobby knows this as well. I mean, we always tell our students about putting the pieces together. And that's how you solve a case. And it's everything. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Even things that hurt your case, you have to include. That's part of your puzzle pieces. You have to disclose that. Things such as purposely altering his digital ID on his phone regarding exactly what you just mentioned, Joel. Why? If she is innocent of anything. There's just so much of this stuff in this case.
Yeah, I start to have that self-doubt. Maybe they will convict, maybe they won't convict. Jim, they wrap this up and put a bow on it, the state does, by saying that Michelle Troconis and Photus Dulos conspired to murder the woman that was standing. Shout out to Dwayne Harris. Look at that. Dwayne, I think you're having a rough night. Shout out to the family. I hope you guys are all well and only good things. But the prosecutor says that Troconis and Fotis Dulos conspired to murder the woman that was standing in their way. The motive was frustration for Fotis of not seeing the kids for a year and a half. Michelle Troconis, sick of it too. That's a motive as old in time, which is love, lust, children. They're kind of hitting them where it hurts. The state is, I don't know. Now that I'm reading the state side, maybe we get a conviction. Did they do a good job or a great job or a decent job of wrapping up their case today, the state?
Well, I think when you start from their point of view, which that's what they have to do, they did a very good job, because you can take all those points, every single point he made, well, I don't know about every single one, almost all of them were valid in and of themselves. And if you just line them up, that's the straight line where it goes. So in that regard, he did a really good job. I thought the first prosecutor did an even better job, but they both did very good jobs. And I think if you look at it that point of view, without doing the presumption of innocence, it's over. If you do the presumption of innocence and you instead focus, as you legally supposed to, focus on her and her mind. And I think it is possible. I mean, it's possible that, she's, this maniacal person herself. I guess the four of us could be, any one of us. I mean, what the heck? You do have to look at somebody's life and her life and the people that your hairdresser and a really good friend. You just got a sense from those people. She's just a sweet, normal person. I think she was selected by the maniac because of that. And that's why I say now, out of the 8.1 billion, she's the last one who would ever find out that he could actually kill somebody, much less the father of these 5 kids. So, but the idea that, oh, good, now we can just go and be happy because we don't have to deal with her anymore. But she's going to be taking care of these 5 kids whose mother is gone. To me, it's unimaginable. But when you only look at it from Fotis's point of view, which is sort of what the cops ended up doing, you really just want to jump her right in there because we don't have Fotis to beat up on. We got to beat up on somebody. And people here have mentioned it a number of times. we really need to vindicate this poor woman and her kids and her mother. It's like, of course we need to, but that you don't do it by just not giving Michelle, who I actually believe, just my own personal belief, is the last legacy of his life. That, oh, I'll mess her up too for life. Although I was very impressed by that observation that his suicide note includes himself, which obviously means it's totally not credible. It means nothing.
I'm looking at Mitzi Blankenship. She says that John Schoenhorn yelled too much. And these are the things that the jury's thinking, I think. To add to this, to that, Bobby, I mean, was Michelle Troconis afraid of Fotis, and that's why she went along? The defense is praying that the jury is asking this question, that she was scared.
That could very well be. I mean, as Jim just said, and we've said a couple of times tonight, that's probably in the equation here at some point. Is it going to be believable for the jury based upon what they've seen in the course of the trial? If you haven't watched every minute of the trial, then you're missing a snippet here and there. They've been in that courtroom from start to finish, and they're going to be chewing on everything that went on in and only in that courtroom. That's a game within a game there, that the evidence, the arguments, the discussion, the body language, the eye contact, they've had a chance from the angle of the jury box to see what's been going on there. So they've had the luxury, unlike I said, unless you watched every second of the trial, which I was not able to do, but they've got a different vibe. They've got a different feel. They were able to put different statements and different pieces of evidence and different body language observations together, and now take that into that jury room. So again, we're able to Monday morning quarterback out here on all the different things that have been going on, but they're in there right now, or maybe not for the evening, but we'll be in there first thing in the morning, chewing on this, and they'll be spitting something out for us in some time with either yay or nay.
Shy Gal says, I believe Fotis used Michelle. We're doing the Shanna Gardner case out of Jacksonville, another murder for hire. She was married to a Microsoft executive, and then her new husband is a guy that you would not expect her to be married to, and everyone thinks that she used him to get the murder for hire plot done. So it does happen often, and we see it play out in courts of law. Only watch closing arguments in STS. I vote guilty on all charges. Color Michelle could be a juror. Jim, to you, a couple of very quick last questions. The defense witnesses, you had someone who came on who was testifying about how language affects the brain. You had a divorce attorney, Michael Rose, a couple of people that attended a party. Were these, and by the way, Jennifer's mother, Gloria Farber, was the final witness for the state, which I think was powerful. But were these defense witnesses impactful, do you think, or not? Didn't hold much water?
Well, I thought they were helpful because they didn't get in the fight. They really just were teaching. The second one had never been a witness in her life. She's been studying this stuff for 30 years, but she's never been a witness. And the first one, she's just really trying to teach us something. And if you're not looking at her, either one of them, as, they're on this side and they're on this side, and just listen to what they had to say, that should persuade all of the jurors of the common sense stuff that they spent their life getting science to back up. We all know, once you've heard what they were telling us, how could we not know this? I love that duck, with the paddling furiously under the water, the person who's talking about multilingual people. They look, when they're in the foreign language, like they're just skimming along, but in fact, they're paddling like crazy because they're trying to process in a different language, and their brain processes in a different language and different sentence structure, all that stuff. Well, of course, as soon as you hear it, that's common sense. But so I thought I thought the best witness was her friend, because her friend, who really from Argentina, similar lives, has a similar daughter. They love each other because they have their daughters, and they love their daughters, and they love skiing, and they love sports, and they're sophisticated and all that. I thought the way she occasionally displayed the very thing that the second expert was talking about, how she, got a little jumbled up occasionally when she was trying to perform in English, because you can tell Spanish is her first language. So I thought, and the way she came across, very cooperative, not the slightest bit fighting on defense, on cross-examination. I thought she came across well and was a good surrogate rather than put Michelle up there. So, but it doesn't matter if in fact the prosecutors did what we all watched. They put all these little dots together in a powerful way. If the jury doesn't stick with the presumption of innocence, Michelle's got no chance. If they do, and they focus on the only thing that really it comes down to, her frame of mind and her experience, she's got a real chance.
Robert Bobby McDonald, you get a real Bobby hat from the UK if you're a Secret Service agent, and that's what he was for 20 years, protecting the President of the United States and other dignitaries. Upon retirement, he worked for the NBA. Now he's at the University of New Haven teaching. Bobby, final predictions here. How many days of deliberations, and is it guilty on all counts or some counts or no counts?
Well, I'm surprised you got me to make a prediction earlier. I'll stick with it 5 days, and I don't think it's on all counts.
Wow. And we will not be doing a show on this for 5 days. Trust me, because I will not make it. But we will cover it once we get a verdict back, if we do get a verdict. And hopefully they don't have to redo this whole thing if it's hung for some reason. Lisa Daddio, she is a retired police lieutenant with the New Haven Police Department. She helped solve the Annie Lay case, very famous case. If you haven't heard about it, Google it. It's on the Google. Since retiring from the New Haven PD back in 2012, she too is working at the University of New Haven. Same thing, Lisa. How many days are they out deliberating? Guilty on all counts, some counts, or no counts?
I'm going to agree with Bobby. I just think they're to come back a little bit sooner than 5 days. I don't know. My guess is 3, and it's going to be guilty on some, not all. And, you know, something that we tend to lose sight on, and I'll be quick about this, is we only have the information that was presented to us, right? So the jury, the attorneys, well, they'll have more, but not everything that came up in this investigation can be heard. And there's always all this extra stuff that goes on that the investigators have. And let's face it, we know there are people out there that know more than maybe what they said, or people that know a lot more that did not come forward. And so that's a definite challenge that we face in this. So we only can go by what the investigators put. And so we have to find guilt on or not based upon the evidence that was presented. So there's always a lot more to this stuff that will come out probably somewhere along the line. But the jury will do what is right. That's what our system is. So, yeah, thoughts and prayers are actually with Jennifer and her family. Just tough case.
Yeah, it's the mom has to be reeling tonight, and she's 88 years old. So our thoughts are with her. The notorious COE. Yes, the jurors are the real MVPs in this case. They have a lot to consider after a long trial. I feel for them. I feel for anyone that's got to sit through that many weeks of testimony. Stark's got it right here. A glass of wine and STS equals a great night. Jim Bergen. Jim, these are the things I wonder about. You spell your last name with 2 N's. Your whole life, you have to be like Bergen, Bergenn. Does that irritate you after a while?
No, because it's true. It's only my family strain. Everybody who's got it spelled like that, I am related to.
Really? There you go.
Yeah, my great grandfather changed it from Tollefson to Bergen with 2 N's for whatever reason. I have, but so at least I know all my relatives somewhere.
There you go. These are the things that I wonder about. I once worked, believe it or not, in West Palm Beach, Florida. There's a photographer there named Joel Waldman, my same name, but with 2 N's. So I would ask him the same question. You have Waldmann. Anyway, it's too late for my insanity right now. CVS just gifted 10 Surviving the Survivor memberships. Jim Bergen, what do you have to know about him? He's with Shipman and Goodwin, a law firm. He's a trial attorney. He's been doing it for 40 years. Jim, number of days of deliberation, guilty on all counts, some counts, no counts. Your final thoughts.
Well, if I'm forced to bet, I got the money and I got to drop it somewhere. I put it on Friday, and I put it on the count of hindering.
There you go. I'm going to revise mine. I think I said 4 or 5 days, but I think juries are anxious. I'm gonna go with tomorrow's Wednesday. I'm gonna say Thursday. They're gonna have to get it done with. If not tomorrow, but we will see. We will be monitoring this, and tomorrow we're doing a show on Shanna Gardner. And on Thursday, I believe I got to talk to Meave Moe and Steve Cohen. Shout out to the great Steve Cohen. Maybe another Charlie Adelson show. Verdict Watch at Surviving the Survivor Trials, the best trials in true crime. Love you, America. Love you, Connecticut. Gotta love Connecticut. And justice for Jennifer Farber Dulos. See you tomorrow, everyone.